welcome to This Week in Business. Today we're talking about scams, and we've all seen them. We're all getting them. So I'm going to throw over to Anthony because he has some good ones to talk about.
Look, I wanted to talk about this topic because we'd get 1 or 2 calls a week from clients who've received an invoice for something that maybe they hadn't known they'd purchased. And often they just want to check in on it and make sure it is a scam. And I thought I'd pick out false billing is probably the number one topic that we see in terms of scams affecting small businesses. And at the top of the list on false billing that I guess we get visibility of are domain names. When we see people getting an invoice there for a domain name, and you start to look on the details of it, and there's little triggers that might indicate that perhaps this isn't quite right. A lot of the time, technically, they're sailing that close to the wind that they're not a scam. So, for example, you get an invoice out for mybusiness.pz, and you're like, hang on, I thought my domain name was .com.au, and you get right down the very bottom of the invoice and it says, this is not an invoice, this is just a recommendation for a service. You know, don't treat this legally as an invoice because it's not. And you look at it and say, okay, well, that's not really an invoice and I don't need to pay it. But probably wouldn't be a week that goes by with that. Another one which we see is business name registration. Now, Kingsley, what do ASIC charge you to register to renew your business name? Is it sort of $100, $50, something like that? Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, Kingsley's not there. Oh dear.
I think it's sort of pure business name. I think still under 100, as opposed to a company or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the invoice for that, or the reminder, will come out of your ASIC portal. We've received a couple of them for our business names, which have come through from various companies, and it's only $250, and we'll take your credit card and sign you up on it. And these are actually quasi-legitimate businesses that are operating out there under the guises of an ASIC reseller or something to that effect. But they're quite happy to empty your pockets for a large amount for a service that you really don't need to pay for that for. Another one which we get a lot of is people advertising in directories. You know, they'll get an invoice saying, oh, we've put you up on this website and, you know, here's an invoice for this particular service. Well, I didn't sign that up. And if your staff aren't onto it and looking at these things carefully, we'll often see these invoices slip through the business and before you know it, they've got an upgraded sale to say, oh, now we're going to upgrade you to this level. Sometimes perhaps censors can fall into that space. They've been a lot better behaved than they were a few years back now. But, you know, we see businesses spending a fair bit of money on these directory listings, and we want to be really conscious of that. Office supplies is another one too. But all these things are things which can leak profit out of your business very, very quickly for no return at all.
Yeah, I actually subscribe to the Australian Cyber Centre or Cyber Security email list. So I actually received notifications about scams, and there was actually one that came through just yesterday, and I have seen it shared on a few pages in groups where it's about Microsoft. So there was obviously a lovely big hack that occurred across multiple platforms in the last sort of 12, 18 months. And now as a result of that, Microsoft Exchange is not so safe. But what they're saying in the latest notification is that you do need to update your software because a patch came out just 2 days ago to update that. So guys, when there are scams coming around and security warnings, it's really important to make sure that you're keeping your devices up to date. I know we don't have David from Too Easy Computing here today, but he would be saying, update, back up to make sure that you are protected from any of these risks. I actually got an interesting scam as well sent through to me from the Internet Crime Commission based in the UK just a couple of days ago. Of course, it went straight to my junk folder, but I check my junk just to make sure there's nothing special in there. And I had a little bit of a giggle because it had the funniest email address that it came from. Now, that is my number one thing to check when I receive strange emails, is I'm always checking where the email address is coming from. Just like Anthony mentioned about the bill comes from a different email address than the normal one. So, it's the sort of first indicator that something's not quite right. But yeah, this one came from some weird name.co blah blah blah, and it was very clear it was not a real email or anything. But they wanted my bank details to allegedly give me some money. I'd happily take the money, but I'm pretty sure that's not what they're doing with my bank details.
That's another common one too, which is the overpayment scam. You will see, businesses receive a credit card payment usually for a particular product. It might be $100 product, and oh dear, we've overpaid you by $10,000. Can you just put that back in our bank account? And of course, you put the $10,000 back in their bank account, and the very next day, the bank calls you and says, you've actually been, this $10,100 payment you've received is been non-repudiated. That means the person who had their card stolen that was used for it has been, has figured out what's happened, and the bank's taken the money off you. So not only have you lost the $100, you've lost the $10,000 you transferred over as well. There's a really easy way to pick these things though, and it's if the behaviour is particularly abnormal. We had one a few years back where somebody bought $100,000 worth of spark plugs from a business. Now, between you and I know that pretty much no one that I know would ever use $100,000 worth of spark plugs. Not even the busiest mechanic in Sydney would use that $100,000 worth of spark plugs within a couple of years. So it was that abnormal that we just sat there and waited for the bank to non-repudiate the transaction. And sure enough, within a couple of days, it had come through and said, "Oh, you've been, somebody's used a dodgy card on you." So it's these are all ways that people will try and find an angle there on it.
So Kingsley, you often get calls about scams because the ATO is the most popular in Australia, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's it's a moving target, but the key thing is that if in doubt, just ring your accountant, because they can. I had one. Unfortunately it's got to the level where we have clients literally bringing in snail mail paper correspondence because they're just so doubtful, and we in that case almost certainly it is real, but you just check it on the computer. There's a bill says you owe $3,000. We can go on there and see, yes, you do indeed have a bill for $3,000 for that particular taxpayer or entity that you've got, and you know that it's real, but it's got chronic. Probably almost the bigger problem we have is the sort of second order effect of people are ignoring genuine correspondence from the tax office, and then getting penalties and interest because they didn't respond, and you're having to say, "Oh, tax man, well, they just simply didn't believe it was you." It's
a false positive, effectively.
Yeah.
You're picking it out as being a scam, and when you speak to them, somebody calls you, the first instinct is you're not real.
Yeah, it is now. It is, and that probably is a good instinct generally.
But you still can pay your tax in iTunes cards, can't you, Kingsley?
Yeah, yes, you can. You can actually come down and pay them to me.
I didn't realise iTunes cards were still a thing.
No, look, I think with all of these things, it is prudent to be careful, but it's also worth checking with the people around you. We've had customers who've lost their domain names because they chose not to pay a bill from their domain provider, and the website's gone down. Well, I didn't think that was real. So exactly the same kind of event with that. If you're in doubt, talk to an expert in your circle of trust, in your network there of people, and find out, because it's going to save you a heck of a lot of pain either way on the other side of the equation.
And look, if you are one of our Business Assist members, feel free to pop it in our group, or feel free to call any of us, any of the network partners. We would be more than happy to help try and get you through these situations if you do have questions. So as members, we are here to support you in whatever way we can. All right. Well, That was interesting on scams, guys. If anyone does want to know more about scams, feel free to comment below. We will try and answer your questions in any way that we can. And do just, keep safe in the digital world. All right. Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you next week.
See you later.
Bye.